Hey guys, so I'm just hopping on here to go over the questions on our quiz review. These are all questions that will show up on our quiz tomorrow and actually on our unit test coming up here in a few weeks. So you are welcome to watch this video in full to check over your answers, to get a reminder of how to practice these skills, or you can just fast forward to any of the problems that you had a question on or that you just weren't sure about. So I'm going to go from the top and just work through each one. So the directions for all of these are to write the slope-intercept form of the equation of each line. And so just a reminder that slope-intercept form is the form y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And so for 1 through 4, we are given a graph. And so we can actually find the slope and the y-intercept without doing any calculations, but just by looking at the graph. So in order to find the slope of given a graph, we first want to find points on the graph where the line crosses through the corner of an x and y coordinate, just so it's easier to identify what that point is. So on number 1, it appears that there's a point here, and it's pretty steep, so it's actually a little hard to see, but I think there's a point here, and it also looks like there's a point here. And so to find the slope, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do rise over run, rise being the vertical change, and run being the horizontal change. And so in this case, if I'm going from left to right, I'm actually moving down. And so I'm moving down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'm moving over 1. And so down 8 would be negative 8 over 1, would give me a slope of negative 8 over 1, which is negative 8. So don't forget to simplify these. And then my y-intercept is the point where this graph crosses or intersects with the y-axis. And so it looks like it intersects right down here at 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. So b equals negative 4. So if I put that all together, and I can write the equation of my line for number 1, which would be y equals negative 8x minus 4. So that is the answer to number 1. So moving on to number 2, I want to identify points on this line. I see a point passing through right here, and it doesn't look like I have another one until right here. And so this line is going upward, so I know my slope is going to be positive. So I want to count my rise over run. So I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be a slope of 4 over 5. And then my y-intercept, it is right here as well at 1, 2. So b is 2, and so my equation of the line, y equals m, which is 4/5, x plus b, which is 2. So that is number 2. All right, moving on to number 3. I'm going to find my points. It looks like I have a point here. I have a point here. So to identify my slope, I'm going to go, the line is going upward, so I know it's a positive slope. So I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 2. So that would give me a slope of 5 over 2. And then for my y-intercept, I'm looking for that point where I cross the y-axis, which is also right here at 2. So when I plug those into my equation of the line, I get y equals 5 over 2 x plus 2. And then finally for this one, it looks like I have a point here. Oops. I have a point here. I have a point here, I have a point here, and here. And this line is going down, so I'm going to have a negative slope, so I can count from any one point to another. Starting from here, I'm going down 1 and over 2. So negative 1 over 2. So my slope is negative 1/2. My y-intercept is right here at 1, 2, 3. So my equation of this line would be y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. So there you go for those. On your quiz, I think there are 2 questions just like that. So make sure you have that down, that you're able to count. Some of the most common mistakes I see on these types of questions are getting the sign wrong on the slope. So remember, if that line is going down, then it's a negative slope. And if your line is going up, then it's a positive slope. And then, of course, like this first one where I had negative 8/1, go ahead and simplify that all the way down to its simplest form. So moving on, this next set is a little bit unique because we don't really have to solve for anything. We're not trying to find anything. We're just trying to rearrange this to be in slope-intercept form. So to be in slope-intercept form, we need to get the y by itself. So these first 2, numbers 5 and 6, are in what's called point-slope form. And so we have over here, there's an x plus something in parentheses. And so we actually have to simplify that side first by distributing. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do first. So here, I'm going to distribute 3/2 to x and the 4. This y plus 4 is just going to carry down. 3/2 times x is just 3/2 x. And then I'm going to add 3/2 times 4. So if you're not super comfortable with fractions at this point, you can always plug that into a calculator. When I'm multiplying fractions times a whole number, I'm going to multiply these numerators together. So 4 times 3 is 12, and then I'm going to divide by 2. So 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. So now I'm getting pretty close. Remember, I just want to get this y by itself, so the only thing in my way right now is this 4. So to move the 4 to the other side, I'm just going to subtract 4 from both sides. On this side, I'm going to subtract it from this 6 because they're like terms. And I'm going to be left with y equals 3/2 x plus 2. So that is my answer for number 5. Number 6, I'm going to solve exactly the same way, and this time I don't have fractions, so it should actually be a little bit more straightforward. I'm just going to drop down the y minus 5, and I'm going to distribute on this side. Now, this is a negative 5 I'm distributing, so I have to keep that in mind. So negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times 1 is minus 5. So now I just need to get y by itself. So I need to move this 5 to the other side. I'm going to add it. I'm going to add it over to this 5. These cancel, so I'm left with y equals negative 5x. And negative 5 plus 5 is 0. So the simplest form of this would actually be y equals negative 5x, because plus 0 is unnecessary, because adding 0 is not going to change this at all. So these next 2 are not in point slope form. There's nothing to distribute, so these should be a little bit, I'll solve these in a little bit different of a way, but the goal here is to get y by itself in both cases. So over here, I'm going to move to this x term to the other side by subtracting it. And that cancels. I'm going to move this down, so I get negative 5y. Now, because I want this to end up in the form y equals mx plus b, I'm actually going to write the x term first. And then that's a positive 48, so plus 48. Now y is almost by itself. It's just negative 5 times y, so to get rid of that negative 5, I'm going to divide everything by negative 5. So these cancel. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1, so I'm just left with y equals. Here I've got a negative divided by negative, so those cancel. 4/5 cannot simplify, so I just write it as is, 4/5 x. And then I want to watch my signs over here. I have a positive and a negative, so I'm going to get a negative, and 48 can't be divided by 5, so minus 48 over 5. And that is my final answer. Okay, so over here we're going to do the same thing. First, when I move my x, it's a positive x, so I'm going to subtract it to move it. These cancel, and I drop down 4y equals negative x minus 32. Oh, and I made a mistake here. This is a negative 4y, so be careful. To get this y all by itself, I want to divide everything by -4. And just like I did before, I want to be careful about negatives. So I'm left with y equals, this is a negative 1x divided by -4. These cancel. And I'm just left with, if this is a secret little 1 here, I'm left with 1/4 x. And then this is a negative divided by a negative, which cancels to give me a positive. And 32 divided by 4, I can simplify. That should be 8. So I'm going to do plus 8. And that is my final answer here. So in these ones, we are just rearranging the problem so that it's in the form y equals mx plus b. Okay, moving on to the next page. These are the ones that we were working on more so this week. Okay, so we are writing, once again, we're going to write the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. And then down here, we're writing the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line through the given points. So this is where we follow the steps, the 1, 2, 3 steps that I've been going over in class quite a bit. So I'm going to write those up top. So step 1 is, the first thing we want to do is find the slope. And in 9 through 12, the slope is already given, so we're actually going to skip this step, but I just want to write it here just so that it's there. So we're going to find the slope, and we're going to do that by using the formula m equals change in y over change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, if you like that version better. Once we have the slope, which in 9 through 12 we already do, we're going to use one point and the slope, and we're going to plug it into the equation y equals mx plus b to find the y-intercept. We're going to use y equals mx plus b. We're actually going to be solving for b. We're going to plug in x, y, and m to solve for b. And over here, we're solving for m. Oh, whoops. I just wanted to circle that. Okay, we're solving for m. Once we have m and b, we can just plug them straight into the equation of the line y equals mx plus b. So we're going to take what we got for m, we're going to take what we got for b, and we have our equation. So on 9 through 12, we are already given the slope, which is m, and we're given a point, which are x and y. So the first thing that I like to do with these is just label what I have, which is x, y, and m. And like I just said, we're going to be using the equation y equals mx plus b for these. And so I'm going to plug in -2 for y. I'm going to plug in -6. I'm going to multiply by 1 for x plus b. And b is what I'm solving for. So the goal is to get it by itself. So I just multiply here first. -6 times 1 is -6 plus b equals -2. And then to move the 6, I just add it to both sides. And I get 4 equals b. So I was given m up here, and now I solved for b, so that is enough information to write my equation. So I have y equals m, which is -6, x plus b, and that's it for number 9. So I'm going to move on to number 10, do the same thing. Here's x, here's y, here's m. I'm going to plug those into my equation, y equals mx plus b, where 3 is y, 1 is m, -2 is x, plus b. I simplify. I get the b by itself by adding this 2 on both sides, and I'm left with 5 equals b. I have m, I have b, I just plug them straight in. Y equals mx plus b. And a more simplified way to write this is y equals x plus 5, because 1x is the same thing as just x. All right, so next one. I have x, y, and m. I'm going to plug these in. Once again, I mentioned this in class today. Every time I do these, I am writing the equations out just so I can get them in my head and practice. So I'm writing y equals mx plus b over and over again just so that I don't forget that and I remember the steps. So I'm plugging in 5 for y, 8 for m, 1 for x, plus b. When I simplify, I get 8 plus b, and I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. This gives me -3 for b, and I already have 8 for m, which was given, and so I have y equals m, which is 8x plus b. In this case, it's -3 because my b was negative. So that's my, that's my equation for this one. And one more, I have x, y, and m. So y equals mx plus b. I'm going to plug in 0 for y equals m, which is -4/5. X is 5 plus b. Now when I'm multiplying a fraction times a whole number, I multiply the numerators together. So -4 times 5 is -20. Divided by 5 is -4. And so I get 0 equals -4 plus b. And then I add this 4 to both sides. And I get 4 equals b. So when I go to plug in my slope and my intercept, I get y equals -4/5 x plus 4. And those are done. So moving on to the next set, I'm going to do the exact same thing, except I have to do one extra step first. I have to actually find my slope first, and then I can find my intercept, and then I can plug these points in. So in order to find my slope, I'm going to use the slope formula, which is m, which is slope, equals change in y over change in x. So I'm going to do y2 minus y1, 0 minus -2, divided by 0 minus 2. This minus negative becomes a positive, so 0 plus 2 is 2, 0 minus 2 is -2, 2 divided by -2 is -1, so that's my slope. Step 2 is to find my y-intercept. I'm going to do the same thing I just did above. Y equals mx plus b. I can pick whatever point I want. Anytime I see zeros, that's what I want to use. I'm going to use this point as my x and y. So, for y, I'm going to put in 0 equals m is -1, x is 0, plus b. Well, this cancels. -1 times 0 is just 0, so I get 0 equals b. If you had plugged into -2 as your point, you would have gotten the same thing. So now that I have my slope and my intercept, I can plug those in. Y equals -1 x plus 0, and I can actually simplify this by saying y equals -x, and just leave it at that actually, because plus 0 is unnecessary. Okay, next one, same thing. I'm going to first find my slope by using the slope formula, change in y over change in x. So I'm going to do 2 minus 1 on top and 2 minus -5 on bottom. 2 minus 1 is 1. 2 minus -5 is actually 2 plus 5, which is 7. So there's my slope. Next, I'm going to find my y-intercept. Y equals mx plus b. I'm going to pick a point. I'm going to use this one because there's no negatives. You can use whichever one you want, though. So in for y, I'm going to put 2. For m, I'm going to put 1/7. For x, I'm going to put 2 plus b. So when I'm multiplying these fractions, I'm going to do 2 times 1, which is 2 divided by 7, which is just 2/7. So I get 2 equals 2/7 plus b. And then I'm going to subtract 2/7 from both sides. This cancels, and I'm going to have to move my work over. I'll move it over here. So I have 2 minus 2/7. I'll write that out. You could plug this in a calculator, but I'm going to do it old school. So in order, this is like 2 over 1. So I need to get a common denominator to be able to subtract. I'm going to multiply this by 7 over 7. And so 2 times 7 is 14. 7 times 1 is 7. Minus 2 over 7. Now I can subtract my numerators and keep my denominators. So 14 minus 2 is 12 over 7. So 12 over 7, and all I was left with on this side was b, so this is what b equals. So now that I have m and b, I can plug that in. Y equals 1/7 x plus 12/7. That's the final answer there. Okay. So moving on, same thing. Slope first. M equals change in y over change in x. I'm going to do y2 minus y1, negative 1 minus 3, divided by x2 minus x1, 0 minus 3. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Be careful here. I have a negative divided by a negative. That just becomes a positive 4/3. That's my slope. Now I'm going to find my y-intercept. So I'm going to use y equals mx plus b. I can pick whichever point I want. I like points that have zeros. Even though there's a negative 1 here, I like working with zeros, so I'm going to use this as my point. So I'm going to plug in negative 1 equals m is 0 times x, which is, oh, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. My m is 4/3. 4/3 x is 0 plus b. And see why I like this? Because 4/3 times 0 is just 0. So I get negative 1 equals b. Okay, for those of you who are smarter than me and noticed some of these things earlier, like in this example, you could have just noticed that when x equals 0, we have a y-intercept without even solving. So our y-intercept is negative 1, and I just realized, I'm trying to see if there was another one. Yeah, up here, same thing. When x equals 0, we have a y-intercept. So 0, 0, we had our y-intercept at 0. So if you notice that, then you don't actually need to do the work like I did. So either way, you'll get the same answer if you do it right. So now I have my slope and my intercept. I just plug it in. Y equals m, which is 4/3, x minus 1, because my y-intercept is negative 1. So there's the answer. And last one on this page, I'm going to find my slope first. Change in y over change in x. So y2 minus y1 is 4 minus negative 4, divided by 0 minus 4. 4 minus negative 4 is like 4 plus 4, so I get 8 divided by 0 minus 4 is negative 4. Remember, when there's a negative in the top or bottom, it just means the fraction is negative. 8 divided by 4 is 2, so this is negative 2 for my slope. And now I want my y-intercept. Y equals mx plus b. I'm going to pick a point. Like I said, I like when there's a 0, and because that's fresh in my brain, I actually know that 4 is my intercept. I don't even need to solve. I know that because when x is 0, I have a y-intercept. Also, you can kind of think through it. If I were to plug these in, I'll go ahead and do that just to show you. Whoops. I would get 4 equals m is negative 2 times 0 plus b. So this cancels, and I'm just left with 4 equals b. So whether you recognize it or you solve it, you'll get b equals 4. And then you can just plug these in. Y equals m x plus b. All right. So that is how you solve. You figure out what the equation of the line is, given 2 points or given a point and the slope. So we've got one more page to go. We're going to be writing